You are probably way too high on Bo Nix in your dynasty leagues. We'll explain why next.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. You can also check me out over on the Locked On Cowboys podcast. And joining me today, as always, is Michael Fabiano. You can follow him on Twitter at Michael_Fabiano. You can also check out his work over on SI. On today's show, we're going to give you our bold takes for the 2025 fantasy season, some dynasty takes that you're not allowed to hold us to. Like, these are just some of our half-baked takes that we're throwing out there that you can't aggregate, you can't clip. But just kind of things that we're thinking as we're going into the offseason. And Fabs, you got a really good one on a certain quarterback in the AFC West.
And it's similar to the situation with CJ Stroud last year. And I'm going to talk about Bo Nix. In the process of preparing for last season's draft season, I wrote an article over at Sports Illustrated about 10 predictions that no one would see coming. No one would see coming. And CJ Stroud being a bust was one of them. And none of us saw that coming because he was so good as a rookie, because they added Stephon Diggs. They were loaded at wide receiver. Everything looked like it was going to be roses for CJ Stroud. And what happened? He smelled like something other than a rose from a statistical perspective. And I look back at the two rookie quarterbacks from last year who had the two biggest seasons. And that was Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. And I'm sorry, I can't say anything negative about Jaden Daniels because I love that guy. So I'm going to say that Bo Nix is going to have a sophomore slump. And Marcus, again, he said this, don't hold us to this. But remember, weird stuff happens in the NFL all the time. Unpredictable stuff happens in the NFL all the time. And so I went back down memory lane because, I like to do that. And I looked at some of the quarterbacks who had sophomore slumps, whether it be completion percentage, passer rating, fantasy points, whatever the case may be. And there's a lot of them. I mean, you go back to Rick Meyer, who was awful in his second season. Sam Bradford had a bad second season. Matt Ryan, Jake Plummer, Drew Brees. Now, this one's a little bit different because remember, Brees had his second year as a starter in year 3. But in his second year as a starter, it wasn't that good. Vince Young was bad in his second NFL season. Robert Griffin III. You may disagree with me, but Dak Prescott took a step back in his sophomore season. And the aforementioned Stroud also had the same thing. So while I hope that neither Daniels or Nix has that sophomore slump, unfortunately, these things happen. And it's not just football, it's in sports. Yep. You just see a lot of guys come out after a big first year and not produce at the same level. And at the quarterback position, there's no one else you can really go with. Caleb Williams was a rookie last year. His numbers were okay, but they weren't great. I think he has a higher ceiling this season. I wonder if Bo Nix hit his ceiling in year 1 with 317 fantasy points, Marcus, and we're going to see a decline in 2025.
There's also a chance, Fabs, that Bo Nix is a better real-life NFL quarterback. But because Denver's defense is so good that they just don't need him to throw the ball 35 times a game like he did at certain points last year. And maybe the run game with RJ Harvey and washed up J.K. Dobbins is better.
How dare you? How dare you put stink on his name?
I know, I'm just joking. But there is a chance that they're just a better team and they're just not – they don't need him to put up these big numbers. And I think a good example would be what Patrick Mahomes has done the last couple of years with the Chiefs, where, they're winning all these low scoring games. And every once in a while he'll have a big fantasy game, but for the most part, he's just playing efficient football. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case for Nix as well.
It's depressing because I do really like this kid. I love what I saw. I didn't see that coming from him, honestly. I mean, remember in the draft, Marcus, people were like, the Broncos drafted him way too high because Penix went earlier than we thought and they needed a quarterback, so they took him. And after he performed so well, he started off slowly, but then he was tremendous down the stretch. People are going to do what? They're going to say, oh, Sean Payton's the second coming of Drew Brees. And if that's true, then maybe he's going to follow in Drew Brees' footsteps and not be great in his second year as a starter. But once again, guys, you got to think out of the box sometimes. Okay. And I love to look at these historical trends, and that historical trend has some weight to it. And so if Nix comes out and has a bad year like CJ Stroud, if he goes from 18.7 points per game down to 15 points per game, 16 points per game, you can't be surprised.
All right. My bold take for the 2025 season and in Dynasty leagues is that we're going to look back at June and July and think, how in the world did we rank Jaden Daniels ahead of Jalen Hurts in Dynasty leagues when Jalen Hurts has everything, right? He's got a fantastic offensive line. He's got established weapons. He's got a really good running back. He's got all the rushing potential and upside. Meanwhile, Jaden Daniels going into year 2, you already talked about the sophomore slump. One of the things that we've seen from Cliff Kingsbury throughout his career is that he'll have one really good year and then teams catch up with him a little bit. And then he'll kind of go back. He just is not a consistent play caller at all. It is because the offense is very simple. And Fabs, I'm looking at these pass catchers. Terry McLaurin, who's in his 30s now, still think he's awesome. He's holding out. There's a chance that we just don't see him at all during training camp. Deebo Samuel, I'm sure you're aware of this Deebo Samuel video that's been floating out there where he looks like he's about 270 pounds trying to run routes. He was never a good route runner before, and now I'm wondering if he's toast. They brought back Zach Ertz to be their primary tight end. He looked done 2 years ago. Like, he's just not going to add anything after the catch. And those are the guys that Jaden Daniels is going to be relying on in the passing game against a much, much better schedule, against an improved division. I don't know if you saw the video from the Giants the other day on their pass rush. It looked absolutely sick, all the guys that they could throw out there. I just would not be surprised if Jaden Daniels has a major sophomore slump, and we're going to look back and think, hey, maybe ranking him at QB3 after 1 year was a mistake.
I agree with you. I actually have Jalen Hurts ranked ahead of him in redrafts, but the reason why obviously is age and what he did last season. But yeah, I wrote an article about this over at Sports Illustrated. I'm sure we're going to talk about this kind of thing too. Is like, how many players last season had historical, magical seasons, and how many of us are now, if you're in a redraft or a startup dynasty draft, are buying at that high ceiling level? It's Jaden Daniels, it's Bo Nix, Brock Bowers. I mean, hopefully God doesn't strike me down because everyone loves Brock Bowers, and I do too. But he had an historical season, and so that's something that you have to talk about. It's really difficult to duplicate that magical season. It really is. And again, I hope you'll go over to SI and check out some of the examples that I posted up there at quarterback, running back, wide receiver. Listen, guys, Jamar Chase, who's awesome, who's the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football, who is going to potentially be the consensus number 1 overall pick in fantasy drafts in PPR, or at worst be 1.2 behind Bijan Robinson. Folks, how many times does a wide receiver have 17 or more touchdowns in a single season? It's not often, and more often than not, they see a drop in that total the following year. You have to keep that in mind. Does that mean Jamar Chase is going to be a dud? No. Does it mean that he's going to score 400 points again? Probably not.
All right, let's talk about some more bold takes for the upcoming fantasy football season, including Fabs' take on Saquon Barkley. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere that you must experience live, and this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Gametime makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the hottest playoff games. And prices on the app actually go down the closer that we get to tip off. And with killer last minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Gametime is a total game changer. I love that I can see my exact seats in the app before you buy. So there's absolutely no surprises. Plus, the app makes it ridiculously simple. 2 taps and I'm done. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Fabs, let's give another hot take. What do you got?
If you draft Saquon Barkley in the top 5 of your Dynasty startup, you are going to be disappointed in the long term. Listen, I love trends. You guys know this. Saquon Barkley has literally every single trend, curse, hex, whatever you want to call it, going against him going into the season. Okay. Right now, his ADP is 17.8. In terms of Dynasty startups, he's the RB4. He's 28 years old. He's missed 26 combined games in his career due to injuries. Historically speaking, if regression is going to come this season, which it seems like it will, and I wouldn't guarantee it, but I'd come damn close, then next season, after a disappointing season, he'll be 29. And then we all know what happens to some running backs, especially guys who've had the workload of Saquon Barkley later on in their career. They tend to see even further statistical decline. So again, let's go through what he's got to overcome. The Madden curse, which I'm not going to get into that, but you guys know all about that. The curse of 370, which is the trend of running backs who touch the ball 370 more times in a single season, seeing the numbers decline the next season. Really, the only player that I looked back at dating back to 2010 who didn't see a statistical decline was Ray Rice. Everybody else dropped in some cases significant amounts of points due to injuries or just due to heightened expectations. And then you've got the curse of the 400 carries between the regular season and the postseason. Go to Sports Illustrated, check it out. There's only about 3 players out of a long list that have had that many carries in a single season, regular season and postseason, who've been better the year after. And more often than not, there's a significant drop-off in that category. And then I've said it before, I'll say it again. He rushed for 2,005 yards last year. He's the 9th player to do that. The first 8 players, every single one of them saw a decline of at least 99.4 fantasy points the following season. And that was Eric Dickerson. Yeah. And Saquon Barkley is a good back. I don't think he's Eric Dickerson. And these backs, Marcus, we're not talking about chopped liver. We're talking about Derrick Henry and Adrian Peterson and CJ2K, Jamal Lewis, Terrell Davis, Barry Sanders, E. Dick, and OJ Simpson. I mean, these were really good running backs. And they all saw statistical declines. So if you draft Barkley in the top 5 at running back, and he comes out and sees a statistical regression of, let's say, 100 points, which is basically what Dickerson saw on the low end, well, all of a sudden, you're not looking at a guy who is this elite type RB1. He's fallen closer into the mid to low RB1 range. And then he's going to be 29 next year. And so how many great seasons are you going to get out of Saquon Barkley? And God bless him, he was great last year. But how many more are you going to get? If the regression monster comes in 2025, which I think it will, what does that make him in 2026 and 2027? I fear Saquon Barkley in dynasty startups. And honestly, Marcus, I kind of fear him in redrafts too.
So I don't worry about Saquon not being effective when he's on the field, because I think the weapons and the offensive line will make it a very advantageous spot for him. Like, I think he's going to be efficient. Now, what I do worry about is like the schedule is a lot harder this year than it was last year. They're playing a first place schedule. That wasn't the case in 2024. But I also, the main thing is the injuries, right? Like when you put that much work on your body in 1 year, generally these guys have a hard time staying healthy. And this is, if you were to do this at age 23, I think we're having a different conversation. But when you do it at age 27, 28, it's different, right? It's not like Saquon's been the healthiest running back in the NFL. It's not like he's been Derrick Henry, where he really only missed one half of a season throughout his entire career. That's where I get a little bit more nervous. Like maybe he tweaks an ankle and he's out 4 games, or maybe he, whatever it is. That's my biggest concern.
No matter what the cause, and injuries have certainly been a part of it. I mean, among the 2,000-yard rushers, Terrell Davis got hurt the following year. But that's also part of the wear and tear on a body. When you carry the ball 400 plus times, when you see over 400 touches. When I was on NFL Fantasy Live, my buddy Akbar, who you probably know from American Ninja Warrior these days, he would tell me, and Akbar played football for a few years, every play is like getting into a car crash. And for a running back, I mean, every time you touch the football, you've got 11 dudes on the other side that are trying to hit you and knock you down. And after a while, I mean, listen, it's just like outside of like Derrick Henry, and even Derrick Henry saw his numbers go down, but Derrick Henry's maybe the exception to the rule because he's such a big dude. Maybe he dishes out the punishment more than he takes it. These guys are human. And when you have that much work on your body, and they needed it because ultimately they got to their goal, which was winning a Super Bowl, you have to worry about what happens with that player the following season. And that's why I'm getting nervous about Saquon Barkley, even in redrafts.
All right, I'm going to give you my quick take before we move on to our next segment. The number 1 receiver in 2025 in fantasy points won't be Jamar Chase. It's not going to be Justin Jefferson. It's not going to be CeeDee Lamb or Malik Neighbors. It's going to be Drake London for the Atlanta Falcons. Now, here's the reason. First of all, we saw Drake London have a really strong last season, 100 catches, basically 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns. He's not that far away already. Like I think he finished as wide receiver 5 or 6 last year, but I don't think people are necessarily valuing him that way. But remember, the first half of the season, he played with Kirk Cousins, whose arm was dead, right? You look at the final 3 games of the season, and I know this is a very small sample size, but in the 3 games with Michael Penix, he averaged 117 yards per game.
Yep.
On 7 receptions. He was averaging 13 targets. We talked about earlier this week. I think this Atlanta defense is going to be awful. And I think the Falcons are going to get into a bunch of shootouts. I think Darnell Mooney, opposite of London, is a good receiver, but he's not a volume hog. I don't think Kyle Pitts is a factor here at all. Bijan's obviously a really good running back, but I just think Drake London could get 180 targets. And if they're coming from Michael Penix in, blowout games or high scoring games, don't be surprised if Drake London is the number 1 overall receiver in fantasy this season.
I'm not going to argue with it. I will say this. You have a very disturbing love of the Atlanta offense coming up with a second-year quarterback. But you know what? Weird stuff happens, and that offense could explode, and Atlanta could end up being one of the better fantasy offenses in 2025 because you've got Penix. If he does what Marcus thinks he's going to do, London, and you've got Bijan Robinson. I'm not going to talk about Kyle Pitts.
It just reminds me a lot of Tampa Bay last year, where Tampa has all these weapons and a bad defense. Like, Tampa's defense was awful. They couldn't stop our guy Cooper Rush in the second half of the year last year, right? So Baker got into all these situations where he's having to throw the ball a bunch, and even with the receivers banged up, those guys were producing monster numbers. I won't be surprised if Atlanta is in a very similar situation. As much as I like their offense, I hate their defense even more. That's it.
Marcus has planted his flag, and Marcus is a smart guy. So
we'll see.
I'm also high on Atlanta's offense coming into next season, not Kyle Pitts.
All right. We've got a special guest for you guys in segment 3. We'll tell you who it is next. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, we have a special guest for you guys today. It is the Great Fabini, the all-powerful, all-knowing Great Fabini, who is going to help us talk about the 2025 fantasy football season. I've got some questions for you, the Great Fabini. Since you know the future, who will be the biggest bargain among quarterbacks based on Dynasty League Football ADP this year?
Well, first off, Marcus, I'd like to thank you for having me on the program and keeping a straight face while introducing me. I think JJ McCarthy will be the best bargain in a Dynasty startup. Why, you might ask? Well, the Great Fabini has all the answers. Right now, JJ McCarthy is the QB 18. His ADP is 145. 145. He was the 10th overall pick in draft last year by the Minnesota Vikings. And Kevin O'Connell's coaching history is absolutely just littered with quarterbacks who have scored boatloads of fantasy points. Matthew Stafford, Kirk Cousins. And last season, Kevin O'Connell did something that even the Great Fabini couldn't do. And that's make Sam Darnold a top 10 fantasy quarterback, averaging 18 points per game. Marcus, did you know that his previous career high was 14.5 points per game?
I did not know that, Great Fabini. I did
horrible. Not. So, if you're drafting a startup Dynasty team and you get JJ McCarthy, you will be extremely pleased. The Great Fabini has spoken.
I just wrote it down. I will make sure I will follow that advice all off season long. All right, tell me, Great Fabini, who is going to be the best value at the running back position this year based on DLF ADP?
I have seen the future, Marcus, and the future is very bright for Isaac Gurrendo in San Francisco. Isaac Gurrendo right now is the RB 48 based on ADP. He's not coming off the board until 153rd. Did we know that he's got a 29-year-old injury-prone running back ahead of him in Christian McCaffrey? Isaac Gurrendo in a Kyle Shanahan offense as the featured back could be an amazing value, not only for 2025, but long-term. Christian McCaffrey is always hurt. The Great Fabini has predicted his injuries over the years successfully, especially when he was on the cover of the Madden game last season. That was an easy one. Even Nostradamus and I were having a joke about that one. Look at his numbers last season. He played 4 games and averaged 12 points per game. That's it. Marcus Mosher could do that. And the injury bug is always an issue, whether it's been an Achilles or a knee or an ankle. Christian McCaffrey is always hurt. He's as hurt as often am I correct, and I am often correct. Christian McCaffrey should not be picked in the first round in redrafts, and he is not a player you should be going after in dynasty startups. Instead, it should be Isaac Gurrendo, who is much younger and could be the featured back for the San Francisco 49ers as soon as 2025, when Christian McCaffrey inevitably will get hurt again. The Great Fabini has spoken.
I'm not surprised on the Christian McCaffrey stuff, because I think even your average NFL fan could probably predict the Christian McCaffrey injury stuff. It is hard to predict.
Are you taking away from the Great Fabini's greatness?
Well, I'm just saying. What's more impressive is that you're able to read Kyle Shanahan's mind, because we know Kyle Shanahan can be extremely fickle when it comes to his running backs. Not so much with Christian McCaffrey, but with everybody else. So you're casting your lot with Isaac Gurrendo. I love it. All right, let's do one more. The Great Fabini, tell me, who will be the biggest value among wide receivers based on ADP this year?
The Great Fabini loves young wide receivers, and the Great Fabini loves the powder blue color of the Los Angeles Chargers.
Is it going to
And
be Quentin
who?
Johnston?
The Great Fabini is much smarter than that, Marcus.
Oh, okay, good.
Tre Harris, the rookie out of Ole Miss, the wide receiver 48 with an ADP of over 90. He is what I see as the future alpha wide receiver for Jim Harbaugh. Look at what he did in college. And the Great Fabini knows all, professional and college. Last season, 14th in yards after catch, 12.0 average depth of target. He led the nation in yards per route run. He was also at the top of the list in the NFL passer rating when targeted metric. That's right. The Great Fabini knows all. And you know what the Great Fabini also knows? That Mike Williams is past his prime and Quentin Johnston will never get there. Draft Tre Harris in your super dynasty startup, all of it. The Great Fabini has spoken.
I was a little worried, the Great Fabini, when you started with the Chargers, because I was going to say this. If you were going to say Quentin Johnston, this was going to be like the scene in Wizard of Oz when the wizard got exposed. That's what we were trending towards.
No, the Great Fabini knows much better, Marcus, than to ever promote a TCU wide receiver.
There you go. No love for Jalen Rager, apparently. All right, that is the Great Fabini. He will be joining the show at certain times this offseason and during the year, so make sure you are on the lookout for him. You can follow him. I don't know. Are you on Twitter, Great Fabini? Should we come up with an X handle, blue sky handle for you?
We may have to do that, although from where I come from, there is no social media.
Okay,
I just give my advice and my prognostications to you, Marcus Mosher, and the audience.
There you go.
On Locked On.
All right, go download the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Check out the previous co-host, Michael Fabiano, on Twitter at Michael_Fabiano. I'm at Marcus_Mosher.
That guy's pretty good. He's pretty good at fantasy football. He's not as good as the Great Fabini, but he's pretty good.
He's worse looking than the Great Fabini, of course, right? All right. We'll see you guys on Monday. Have a great weekend.